come down and say, what is funk? How would you describe funk to someone who'd never heard it before?
Okay. Funk, the best way I can describe it to me, all right, I remember George Clinton saying something like this. He said, rock and roll is like the blues sped up. It's like a faster version of the blues. So funk is kind of like, it's not as slow as the blues, so it's right in the middle, you know. But I think the whole concept to me and what funk really means to me is it's black rock and roll. It's when George said we have returned to reclaim the pyramids, that's what that represents to me. You know, like, you know, I don't know. It's like we're showing you and we're coming to reclaim what's ours, and this is ours. Rhythm and blues, what you call rock and roll, this is our music. You know, it's not just about, you know, no disrespect, but, you know, white boys playing guitars. It's not what, you know, we kind of invented this. So, and it's just like a
So what you just saw was one of the rare interviews that D'Angelo actually took part in, where he's openly explaining the real roots of rock and roll and how that is relevant to the overall soul of black music, right? And I'm sure you're looking at this title, and the title says all rock and roll music is black music, right? And D'Angelo is explaining that exact concept. A lot of times I think a lot of people don't understand the history of rock and roll. They don't understand the roots of blues and jazz and how it was influential in the evolution of modern day music. Soul, R&B, pop, all stem from what black Americans like D'Angelo created and what he actually kept the legacy going from, right? A lot of people have forgot where rock and roll came from and who invented rock and roll. So I'm going to take this time to first pay my condolences to the late, great D'Angelo and give him my thank you for the inspiration that he gave me, not only as an artist and creative, but as well as a man and also a music historian. So, rest in peace, D'Angelo. Thank you. As well, I would be remiss to not be able to give my condolences as well to Angie Stone. Angie Stone is also an influential woman in this scene. She was very influential in the understanding of soul and R&B at a very pivotal time in our entire, 90s Renaissance. She was one of the biggest parts of that. And so salute to her. Rest in peace, Queen Angie. So within the interview, D'Angelo talks about a lot about his influences and the music that he was listening to growing up and kind of the bands that really influenced him to become the great musician that he became. And he mentioned guys like James Brown, and also he talks about Parliament, right? And also how they influenced him so much, right? George Clinton and Jimi Hendrix, Isley Brothers and Chuck Berry, some of the most iconic Black American rock and roll artists have ever lived. And of course, that would be a huge influence to a man like D'Angelo, because you can hear within his music the funk elements, the blues elements, the rock and roll elements, all these things that he's cooked up over time as an artist and as well as a man. He was one of the first, I think, in this genre where he was blending not only rock and roll and blues, but he was also bringing in jazz, a lot of jazz elements, a lot of really great drums and drum progressions that a lot of people hadn't heard. A lot of offbeat stuff that Questlove talks about really was influential in his style and who he became as well. And so I think sometimes when we look at rock and roll and kind of where it's become now in 2025, we forget about how influential it was, because the genre has been overtaken by those who infiltrated. So let's talk about a few of those who come in, taken over this genre, and kind of made it into what we consider the mainstream rock and roll that we have today in 2025. From bands like the Beach Boys, who were notorious from record labels taking songs from black artists and then them going ahead and doing a cover of that same song. And then on those white charts, it would completely go, and I guess at that time it would go viral, but what they would say would chart, right? For those regular Billboard charts, right? And that was definitely what was going on right at those times. And there was, a lot of that happening as well with Elvis Presley. Elvis Presley was notorious for, going and going into different juke joints and different areas in Tennessee where he was from to go ahead and learn, understand the vernacular, the dance moves, and then he would take that, prepackage it up, and then he could sell it as the king of rock and roll, guys. Elvis Presley, hilarious, right? Because this guy literally took everything from Black Americans. You got people like the Rolling Stones. The Rolling Stones were notorious for saying that even their name, the influence of the name that they had, was from a song by Muddy Waters. Okay? This is just how influential Black American music, Black American rock and roll was to the world, okay? Not just to America, okay? To the world. How influential rock and roll as a Black American was for the rest of the world, where you had literal bands that were larger than life, okay? The Rolling Stones were as big as they were the biggest, right? But there was someone who was just a little bit bigger than them. And you also have to credit that they as well gave credit to the big guys, and they were also the Beatles. The Beatles have made it clear that they got a lot of their influence from some of those very early Bo Diddley and guys like Chuck Berry, who were extremely influential towards bands like the Beatles, bands who were really into the blues, guys like Howlin' Wolf, who were influential at the time, who were larger than life when it came to not only music here in the US, but also music in the UK, where the Beatles as well, where the Rolling Stones were from, and that region started to really, really gravitate towards the black blues, Black American experience, and they took that music and then ran with it. And so I think a lot of times when you look at why rock and roll has become where it is today is because of those faces that took it and ran with it, okay? We see that all the time now, even in the modern day, where you have, a lot of artists who have taken on certain genres, and then once they get, the attention and the fan base that they need for the support, they go ahead and take the complete flip-flop and change up on us. And we've seen it multiple times where that can also be a way for them to gain popularity, for them to gain a cool factor, for them to also gain an entire fan base. And so I think from us, especially guys like D'Angelo, who were extremely influential in these spaces, he was very, very open about, like he said, reclaiming our pyramids, meaning reclaiming our genre. We invented rock and roll music. We should be the ones playing rock and roll music. We should be the ones gatekeeping rock and roll music. That's what he was speaking on. And of course, yes, D'Angelo, being the man that he is, he's going to be able to express himself in certain ways. And I think from the elder standpoint, where he's saying guys like George Clinton, who are very influential, he's speaking for them too. Now, the story goes that in 1936, Robert Johnson from Hazelhurst, Mississippi, was one of the first to actually be the architect for what they would call the Mississippi Delta Blues, which would then be the stem for rock and roll. Now, the story goes that Robert was a very, very subpar guitarist, but one day he went to the crossroads, and on those crossroads, he ran into a man who made let's say a wager with him, right? He said, if you sell your soul to me, I will give you the gift to become the greatest guitarist that the world has ever known. Now, this is some Black American folklore, so who knows if this story is true, right? But I always love a great origin story. You know what I'm saying? And just to think, right, the origins of rock and roll and what everyone talks about, the Prince of Darkness and all this stuff that they always like to associate with that persuasion of people. I think it's important that we also understand the mysticism of Black Americans, right? Because we do have a lot of mystery to ourselves, and there's a lot of stories that that get kind of mixed up and kind of forgotten. And I love stories like this because this is the origin story of Black American music, right? And specifically Black rock and roll. All right. And I love the fact that there is an origin story that, is so deep that we have movies like Sinners that have, kind of touched on these subjects, and we got to see it in that capacity, just the power of not only the story, but the sound, the feeling, the energy that was going on in the Mississippi Delta during that time. You can't tell me that stories like this don't seem a little bit true, right? They don't seem a little bit fun to listen to, and also they're still rooted in some very, very dark truths. And sometimes those dark truths came with a lot of people who were forgotten, just like Sister Rosetta Tharpe. She was one of the architects, one of the first to actually create this genre that everyone calls rock and roll today. She had a particular sound and was one of the first to actually contribute her sound, her ideas to something new that nobody had heard before. And sometimes this is just what would happen during this time, was that you had talented, amazing, very, very great Black American artists, but they did not get the same platforming that a white artist would get. So with her creation, someone could take it, create their own sound of it, and then just go off onto the charts, sometimes even taking someone's entire song, all right? Taking their song, their entire performance, taking it to a totally different audience, and then being able to monetize off of that. Doesn't that sound quite familiar? From Little Richard to Howlin' Wolf. From Howlin' Wolf to James Brown. From James Brown to Muddy Waters. From Muddy Waters to Isley Brothers. And from the Isley Brothers to Jimi Hendrix. This is the progression that a lot of people do not talk about when it comes to rock and roll music. This is the progression, okay? Starting behind the sister, from the sister to Little Richard, from Little Richard to Howlin' Wolf, from Howlin' Wolf and Muddy Waters to James Brown, from James Brown to the Isley Brothers down to Jimi Hendrix, and it just keeps going. The lineage of Black American music and Black American rock and roll artists is iron solid, okay? The creation, the influence that you can see across all genres from these men and women have still permeated waves throughout music that can never ever be rectified till this day. We will never see this again because it was so influential that it cannot be touched, to the point to where now you had the evolution of a guy like D'Angelo, right, who became one of the highest levels. Guys like Prince, all right, who is also a natural progression from this, okay? And Prince came before D'Angelo. So when I hear people talk about the genre of rock and roll and what it looks like in 2025, it's hard for me to understand that, because I always think about the history of music. And the history of music is what I just mentioned right there. Those men and women who have been influential in the creation of the genre since day one. I remember some of my earliest memories was watching D'Angelo's behind the scenes about Voodoo, where he was in Havana, Cuba, and they were shooting, all the pictures and imagery for it, the videos and all that stuff. And it was just so interesting to me. You know, this guy from America who was from New York, and he's out here in Cuba, you know, living his dreams, singing these great songs with so much swag and just an overall coolness to himself. You know, it was very inspirational. And so hearing those songs and listening to those words, you know, how influential they were on me, especially growing up, man. I could never really fully, like, I guess, express it, you know, just because when you're a kid and you don't really know yourself, you don't know who you are yet, and you're still trying to, you know, figure out the world. Music helps you get through that, and music helps you kind of figure things out. And I saw D'Angelo as somebody that I could look up to and model myself after, just as far as like how he carried himself and the depth that he represented, not only just as a singer but as an artist. And I felt that it kind of set him apart from other R&B singers at the time. You know, maybe there were guys who were kind of like, you know, just kind of doing the same Johnny Gill type of vibe, you know, and that was going on, Bobby Brown, those type of energies. But I like the fact that he brought something a little different, especially in the, you know, 90s, you know, early 2000s. It was definitely something different about D'Angelo that kind of struck me very early on as a kid. And I just loved everything that he brought to the table, and it really just made me want to learn more about not only him but music in general, and kind of his influences and why he was, you know, choosing this specific genre and how he made his music. And so I think that was kind of a big influence on me as I was growing up, just kind of, you know, having to understand where rock and roll and what soul was and what funk was, and trying to really understand the people who were integral in building those genres. And it was so dope that D'Angelo was kind of the gateway for me, you know? D'Angelo was a once in a lifetime artist. You know, there's not a lot of artists that we see these days who are going to come and really choose to be different and to make a different sound and to try to push the boundaries of what a lot of people would say a certain genre has to be or is. I think when a lot of people tried to box him in with that neo soul tag, he broke out of that by saying that his music is black music. And he specifically said that to set himself apart from everyone else, because he understood the history of the music that he makes and the music that he wants to attach himself to. And I think sometimes I look at a lot of artists and a lot of imagery and a lot of symbolism, and I think that D'Angelo has the same mindset that I do, meaning a lot of things mean something to him. And him purposely saying that he makes black music meant something to him because he is a black man. He's a Black American. And he wanted to make it clear that his sound, his genre is directly connected to the ancestors and the people who paved the way to him. And he always wanted to make sure that he paid homage to that. And I love the fact that that is just a constant reminder of his legacy, was the fact that he always, like he said, was reclaiming his pyramids. And it definitely raises the case, to me at least, that all of us should rock and live with a certain level of pride about our history and our heritage, what we are connected to, our lineage. D'Angelo made it clear that there is a specific lineage that he wants to be attached to when it comes to his music. He said that he makes black music. So with that being said, I think it's important for all of us to make sure that everything that we do is attached to a certain level of lineage, a certain level of class and respect for those who came before us, and also for those in the future. So for any artist out there who's, you know, got any reservations about making rock and roll music and you're a Black American, understand that this is your genre. This belongs to you. It's not just to everyone else, okay? So don't ever feel like you don't have any way in, or that you don't know what you're doing. It is in you because we created it. So you guys let me know in the comments what you guys think. Are you guys D'Angelo fans? Tell me about your favorite D'Angelo song. Let me know what's up. Because at the end of the day, I have a lot of respect for D'Angelo. He's one of the biggest components to me and the levels of things that I've wanted to accomplish in my own life and things that I've done in music. And it could only be attributed to a guy as influential as D'Angelo. So once again, rest in peace to D'Angelo. Condolences to his family, and much love to everybody out there. Make sure you guys like, share, and subscribe on this video. My name's Brandon B, and I'm out. Peace.